Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to mismapasion, and game week number 8 of the WSL has just wrapped up, so let's get right into all of the scintillating action that took place over this weekend. Our travels through England started in Brighton, in what was basically a regional derby, with the Seagulls take on first-time winners in West Ham, and much like a manual car, it took a while for the match to get into top gear. As expected, it was Brighton who commanded the match in its initial goings and throughout the majority of the game in earnest. West Ham, meanwhile, were holding their own and looking to try and build on their recent uptick in form, especially considering that Brighton were coming off of drubbing themselves. But it would be the home side who capitalized first with their dominance, yielding a well picked out goal from McLaughlin, whose shot placement was absolute tea as the Gauls went into the second half, being deservedly in the lead. The home side maintained their dominance the next 45, but most of it had admittedly ceded despite doubling their lead through Seke, as West Ham had stepped up their game just enough and were now stoking the fires of an intense finish to the fight. This would come to pass a few minutes later after Brighton's second goal as Hammers captain Katrina Gorey rang the battle cry and mounted her side's resurgence with not one but two banger goals to draw West Ham level. Now we had a proper game on our hands, people, which was unfortunately slightly marred with the forced exit of West Ham's hero as Gorey came off with what looked like a painful shoulder injury, which fingers crossed is just a flesh wound. Back to the game though, and despite losing their captain, West Ham continued to knock on the door against Brighton and really should have gone ahead on more than one occasion, but Sophia Bagley was in her element, which really helped to keep Brighton in the game. For their efforts, Brighton did manage to keep up with their opponents as you would expect, and despite them being pushed towards the limit, they did not break and actually grabbed themselves the winner with Frank Kirby wrapping her foot around the ball to hit it true and sure to secure the 3 points in a 5 goal thriller to keep her side well within the top 4 against a very good West Ham team who are starting to finally wake up from their malaise, and hopefully they can continue improving whether or not Gorey is on the shelf long term. Next up, we had the North London Derby taking place at the Lily White Spaceship with Tottenham Hotspur taking on Arsenal, who were still steeped in their rich vein of form under Renee Slagers, and that was all but clear to see for everyone, with an opening salvo in the first minute that saw Alessia Russo put the Gunners in the lead before the trumpeter had even made their way down from the roof. Arsenal maintained the early pressure on Spurs, who honestly looked like they were suffering from PTSD from their match against Man City last week, as the visitors overwhelmed them with ruthless efficiency, and eventually that yielded a second goal from Frida Monum just 20 minutes later. With all due respect, Spurs were extremely passive in the first half and were like a days ago with regards to their attitude, as they could not string together enough passes to make Arsenal break some kind of sweat and eventually opted to just hunker down until the second half so that they could regroup, with the only highlight for them coming from a good effort from range by England that was parried away by Van Domselaar. The second half was much improved from Spurs as the halftime break did allow them to indeed regroup, and they provided a much better account of themselves despite some early emotional flarings from the likes of Rasso and Hunt, who were getting flustered by their North London neighbours. Despite Spurs' improvements, Arsenal continued to dominate and soon tripled their lead with an excellent counterattack that was finished off by Stina Blackstenius, who had just come off the bench to all but secure the win for Arsenal. Tottenham really never turned up to this game, just like last week, and they were punished for it by their dominant opposition, who for their part maintained their win streak and continued to strive and thrive higher and higher under their new manager Renee Slagers, who is looking more and more likely to become the permanent Arsenal head coach, and it would definitely be a deserved promotion. The final game on Saturday at the Bridge was by far and away the match of the weekend, as top of the table contenders Chelsea welcomed Manchester City in a match that delivered on all fronts, and you could not take your eyes off this game for even a second. This was two raging bulls fighting for supremacy, and the one with the darker shade of blue was large and in charge in the first half, as Chelsea reddened the palms of Yamashita, with Hamano, Gururaiten, and Ramirez all getting a chance to bite at the cherry, but to no avail. City found themselves in an unfamiliar situation of being held back in their own half for as long as they did here against Chelsea, but they did manage to keep up with the Blues nevertheless, and even had a few moments at goal themselves. But Shaw would go through what ended up being a slow day at the office, where she found no joy at goal, with Millie Bright making sure to marshal her with ruthless efficiency. The first half ended in a tense but tantalizing stalemate, and as the teams came out for the second half, You could sense that there was something in the air, and that suggested that something major was surely about to come. The winds of change did indeed come right away as a field tilt made a complete 180 to favor the visiting citizens, who started to find themselves more and more in this half, with Chelsea now having to concede ground and do their fair share of extensive defensive duties. As the game wore on, neither team looked to have the edge on one another in relation to tactics, as both Taylor and Bompastor had set up their teams to an elite level, and the players themselves looked to have each other's numbers, as exemplified by Alex Greenwood's excellent marshalling of Ramirez, who has been the usual menace that she is in front of goal since the beginning of the season, and this was clearly on show, particularly in this game. And it would finally take individual errors to see the deadlock broken in the final 15 minutes of the game, as Ramirez, surprise surprise, would finally open the scoring for Chelsea after being afforded a yard or two too much that allowed her to see the goal where she made no mistake but to convert. And the shift in momentum would be capitalized on by Chelsea, as after a corner routine did not go in their favor, the champions were quick to recycle possession, and I don't know if City were still rattled by the earlier goal or if they just lost energy, but nonetheless, they failed to shut down the attack, and the ball found its way to Brighton, who applied a hefty dose of finesse in her shot to get the second goal just 4 minutes after the first to send Chelsea to the top of the league. Still unbeaten, whilst Manchester City suffered their first loss of the season, it was a box office game that you could watch again and again and again. Sunday kicked off much like Saturday with yet another match that got real good towards the tail end, as Aston Villa locked horns on home turf with Crystal Palace. If you watched the last 2 to 3 videos I made on the WSL, then you'll know just how critical I am of Aston Villa and their poor performances so far in the season, and this game against fellow bottom half opposition looked like it was going to be more of the same critique as before, in which it actually did end up being somewhat, as Palace were first to strike 30 minutes in after Kato was handed the opportunity on a platter by Gale. Palace were in firm control and looked like they were going to be able to see out the half until just 10 minutes later, when against the run of play, Anna Patten found the equalizer with a well-taken shot that was low and fiery before Rachel Daly took inspiration from her team's resurgence to double the lead for the home side to go into the second half in the lead. As the final 45 ticked by, Palace were fighting tooth and nail to get themselves on level footing, whilst Villa were looking to maintain their narrow lead whilst trying to capitalize on the moments they conjured up to extend it. It was a battle of attrition that Palace ultimately won out on, with Annabelle Blanchard finding the level third with a superb strike that was preceded by a great attacking run that was picked up on by the home defense. Throwing one last shake of the dice, Villa boss DePaul brought on some wholesale substitutions in the search for a winner, and with the penultimate play of the game that had reached the end of extra time, substitute Ebony Salmon found the winner to hand Aston Villa their first victory of the season in what was yet another nail-biting encounter akin to the first match of the weekend. Whilst Villa will look to make good on this performance, Crystal Palace will undoubtedly feel hard done by, but that is the cruelty of football, and the Eagles will learn from this. The penultimate game of the week, which doubled as a doubleheader with the final game, saw what was honestly a pedestrian performance, as Manchester United worked hard to see off Super League stragglers Leicester City 2-0 with goals coming from Turland and Bizet in either half to secure the 3 points for the Red Devils, in what wasn't much of a match to begin with given how stodgy the overall game played out, but nevertheless it was an important win for United, all things considered. The second doubleheader was the third derby of the weekend, with Everton welcoming Liverpool to Goodison Park in what would be a match that was mired in so much controversy come the final whistle. Likely having seen the results elsewhere, Everton were now the only WSL side without a win to their name so far this season, and they brought the fight to Liverpool as a result. The Toffees were vigilant at the back and furious up front, as time and again they threatened the Reds' defense, but the likes of Bonner and Micah were on hand to quell the flame blue ferocity. Toni Payne in particular was a very bright spark for the home side, as she ran the defense ragged and was only let down by the fact that in the moment she advanced up the pitch, 9 times out of 10 it was on her own, so it made it easier for her to be stopped by the opposition. Nevertheless, Everton's relentlessness paid off controversially, mind you, towards the end of the first half, as the Toffees were granted a penalty after Hayashi was brought down on the outside of the box in all honesty, but the ref and linesman decreed it to be a penalty, I guess, given that Hayashi ended up falling into the box. But unfortunately, without VAR, Liverpool could cry all they wanted to, but to no avail, as Katja Schnois would make no mistake to convert from the spot to give her team the lead going into the second half. Liverpool would come out fighting in the second half to bring themselves level, but the opposition channeled the spirit of men's team coach Sean Dyche to an elite standard, as they would not be shaken at the back, as Courtney Brosnan in particular played out of her skin to prevent her net from rippling in any way, shape or form, with her triple save against Fuka Nagano in particular being a highlight of the game. The referee would be in the spotlight on at least 3 occasions in this half as well, as Liverpool had 3 penalty shots denied, one after the other. And in all honesty, I am on the side of the referee here because they were never really legitimate penalty shots, and I think it showed a marked improvement by the referee in terms of her own performance, as well as the linesmen, or lineswomen in this case. The time would tick by and Liverpool would throw everything at the wall, from Smith and Hines getting their own opportunities to get a goal, with Matt Beard going as far as to throw on purely attack-minded substitutes, but nothing would stick, as Everton would hold firm to finally secure a win for themselves in what will be a match for the ages for the Toffees in years to come, and a great match to close out the weekend. With the end of Game Week 8 of the WSL, there have been some significant shakeups all across the table, as Chelsea finally usurped the stranglehold of Manchester City to go top of the league, whilst Everton and Aston Villa finally recorded wins for the first time this season to leap above Leicester City, West Ham and Crystal Palace, who now occupy the bottom 3 spots respectively. What are your thoughts on the games that were played this weekend, and which match stood out the most for you? Leave your answers in the comment section below, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one.